As the planet reaches record highs of oil consumption, with 706 million gallons of waste oil reaching our oceans each year, a recent study which looked back at the BP Deep Horizon oil spill disaster revealed that 8 years on, communities of microbes and marine organisms in the area are still showing vast levels of reduced biodiversity, as well as oil residue still being visible on shipwrecks in the area. We will be looking at current methods that are employed to clean up such spills, emerging methods, and posing the questions: should oil spills be cleaned up at all? And are big oil companies really concerned about the environment, or just making themselves look good in the public eye? So, why is oil consumption so high?
Oil consumption has never been higher, with demand increasing 39.2 million barrels a day, and that demand is coming from the EU, the USA, and Southeast Asia, in particularly China.
The graph on the left shows that global consumption is at an all-time high with no signs of slowing down, and despite the demand decreasing from the EU and the USA, demand from Southeast Asia and particularly China is only continuing to increase.
Oil is used widely in today's world, in both domestic and industrial settings. However, the physical properties of oil mean once it is mixed with water, there can be extreme environmental consequences.
Due to its polarity from the uneven distribution of charge across the molecule, water is able to form hydrogen bonds between its neighbouring molecules. Oil molecules, however, are non-polar, repelling the water molecules. Due to its lower density, the oil then sits on the surface of the water, unable to mix. In the ocean, the oil slicks may remain cohesive or break apart in rough seas, wind and currents, causing them to separate over large seas. As the oil sits on the surface, evaporation occurs, making it more dense, then allowing some to sink with suspended particle matter, whilst the remainder congeals into sticky tar balls.
Due to oil being used globally, but only found in parts of the earth, spills usually occur during transportation. However, this is not always the case. One of the more famous spills in history was the wreckage of the Exxon Valdez oil tanker in 1989. The tanker struck a reef 1.5 miles off the coast of Alaska whilst transporting heavy crude oil to Long Beach, California, and released 10.8 million gallons. It's known as one of the worst human-caused environmental disasters in history due to the location. The area is habitat for seals, sea otters and salmon. A major component of controlling and cleaning the spill was the use of booms.
A boom is a piece of floating equipment that sits on top of the water and has up to 48 inches of material underneath to stop oil from seeping below it. Booms are used to either contain oil in one location or deflect it away from a sensitive area of water. And the use of booms normally goes hand in hand with the use of a skimmer device. Skimmer devices remove oil from the top of water and either work through suction like a vacuum, or they can remove the entire top layer of water and filter out the oil later on, or they can contain an oleophilic oil attracted drum which the oil sticks to and the water falls off of.
The area in which the tanker crashed had a large number of salmon fisheries which provide the USA as a food source, and booms were crucial in keeping the oil away from these areas. Oil can have long-lasting effects on salmon. If juveniles are exposed, they will grow a lot slower and develop heart defects, meaning they do not reach full size and therefore struggle to swim, reducing their chances of survival. If booms weren't used as they were in this situation, there would be drastically reduced availability of salmon across the US, and stocks would have been affected for many years to come.
The best known oil spill of recent years happened in 2010 in the Gulf of Mexico. An explosion of the BP Deep Horizon oil rig destroyed a well cap, which then spewed over 200 million gallons of light crude oil 5,000 feet below the ocean's surface over an 87-day period.
The leak was finally stopped when engineers bolted a sealing cap on top of the wellhead and pumped in a mixture of heavy kill mud and cement to permanently seal it.
The explosion itself killed 11 people who were working on the rig at the time when the oil was released, has been linked to the death of over 6,100 seabirds, 600 turtles, and 153 dolphins which washed up on the shores across the Gulf. The numbers of common bait fish at the bottom of the food chain were also drastically reduced by the disaster, which in turn then caused the USA stocks of bluefin tuna to drop by 20%.
During the cleanup of this spill, surface oil contained by booms was removed using in situ burns. And in situ burns are normally only used a large distance away from inhabited areas because the smoke it produces can be toxic to humans. And it's normally not carried out in Arctic areas either, because the deposited soot can increase the rate of ice melting.
If burning is done in the right way, it can also reduce in a residue similar to toffee, which can be extremely difficult to remove as it can sink.
BP's main approach to clearing the spill was through the use of dispersants. Dispersants are chemicals that are applied to break oil into smaller pieces so they can mix more readily with water. They don't remove the oil from the ocean but push it further in and disperse it.
The chemicals themselves can be toxic to fish at all stages of life, can stop fertilisation and settlement of coral reefs, can affect the respiratory and digestive organs of sea turtles, and can cause liver and kidney disease in humans. So therefore, careful consideration must be taken before using these chemicals.
During the BP oil spill, over 1.84 million gallons of dispersants were used, more than any other in history. Of the two types of dispersants used, one contains a solvent which is known to be a human carcinogen and also to be very toxic to marine life and microbes. 7 workers were also hospitalised as a result to the repeat exposure. We were able to obtain a brief interview with a representative of BP to hear his comments of the clean-up.
So, I'm here with BP's Director of Environmental Policy, Alan Blackstead. Alan, at the time of the Deepwater Horizon spill, there were 18 dispersant agents which were approved by the Environmental Protection Agency. Can you tell me why you chose to use the dispersants Corexit 9500 and Corexit 9527A?
Well, they were the best options at the time.
Are you aware that they've both been banned in UK waters since 1988 due to their toxicity to marine life?
I'm aware of that, however, as the spill took place off the Gulf of Mexico, those regulations did not affect the cleanup.
Studies have shown that the Corexit dispersants were 55 and 63% effective on the specific type of oil leaking, while 2 other dispersants on the EPA's approved list were 100% effective and also 10 times less toxic to marine life. Can you comment on this?
Well, I'd have to check the figures on that, but the chemicals were selected by a professional team.
Is it true that current board members and executives of Nalco, the company who produced the Corexit dispersants, used to be board members of BP?
Yes, that is the case, but...
So were the products selected because they were cheaper due to ties between the companies?
No, we don't attempt to save money through shortcuts in a situation like this.
Well, if saving money wasn't the driving factor in the way this was handled, why were tax loopholes exploited to deduct and claim back $15.3 billion from the $20 billion settlement BP were instructed to pay the US?
Okay, no more questions.
An emerging method of cleanup being researched by many is bioremediation. Bioremediation is the use and stimulation of microbes to remove oil from an ecosystem. Microbes do this naturally anyway, by using the hydrocarbons which make up the oil as a source of carbon. But in cases of spills, extra nutrients must be added to accelerate the process, such as nitrates, phosphates and iron. Often dispersants are used as part of this, and extra microbes such as Pseudomonas HK44 are engineered to digest the exact type of oil spilled at the site.
Earlier, we interviewed an expert in the area of bioremediation to gather some insight into how oil spills should be handled.
Does the amount of fertilisers and nutrients need to be specifically calculated for the amount and type of oil spilled before they are added?
Yes, it does. I don't know to what extent that is done, because sometimes you're responding very quickly, and if you think about this, you're adding stuff on a large scale, and that can cause all sorts of issues. You just can't do those calculations very easily. So yeah, it does matter, and the type of fertiliser matters a lot, because you can do more damage by adding too much fertiliser. You can lead to eutrophication and just encourage the wrong types of microbe.
Do you think there are any advantages to leaving the oil spill alone?
In many cases, you don't want to leave it alone, but if it's far out to sea, if it's highly volatile, then yeah, leave it alone. It'll have gone into the atmosphere and done comparatively little harm.
So we've already heard that oil will naturally evaporate from the surface after a spill, and that in some cases it's just best to leave them alone. An expert in marine pollution from the University of Liverpool stated that while in some cases oil spills should be left alone, pressure on politicians from the general public in the wake of a large spill may influence their decision to attempt a clean-up, even if it's not necessary and may end up doing more harm than good. One expert from the Britain's National Oceanography Centre studied areas affected by the Exxon Valdez crash and found that those which had been subjected to the largest amount of chemical treatment took the longest time to recover their natural biodiversity, whereas areas completely untreated had some of the fastest recovery rates.
Pressures from the public and government bodies often means action is taken immediately when an oil spill occurs. However, in an ideal world, the most effective response would be calculated and measured by professionals. The lack of time to plan a response often leads to harmful effects coming from the clear-up. New techniques are reducing these effects, however, it is not clear if there will ever be a perfect method.